Well, the Capitulator-in-Chief is at it again. The coward in the White House, the courageous man in the White House, has decided to throw in the towel again on Ukraine. Um, None of this is in stone, and I wouldn't put all my bets on it. We know he changes his mind, on a dime, and he could change his mind in a couple of days and have the exact opposite opinion. So we'll see what happens. But what we're going to talk about is the 28-point peace plan. And the fact whether he changes his mind or not doesn't really matter because it's obvious there are powers and people influencing him in that White House that they are controlling him literally, and they believe Ukraine should die. I mean, we've seen him come out a few times when he's speaking for himself, and I think from the gut, where he says he hates the killing of all these people on both sides. And, he said recently that he's going to put the screws to Russia. But he's come out with this 28-point peace plan now, which is very similar to what they had a few months ago. And it's really funny when you read the stories about it. They're like, there's a 28-point peace plan. But if you want to find what the 28 points are, you got to really dig. They rarely actually tell what they all are. Anyway, I just want to talk about a few things here. I want to talk about how immoral this 28-point peace plan is. It's just absolutely immoral. I want to ask, how in the world do MAGA supporters who consider themselves Christians, how in the world can they justify this biblically, from a biblical point of view, denying a nation the right to self-defense and asking a nation to just capitulate to a foreign aggressor, an unprovoked aggressor? What kind of biblical principle can you possibly come up with that would justify that? Because I'll tell you something, there isn't one, okay? There's not one. So I want to talk about that, and I want to show you how close Russia is to falling. Russia is this close. They're this close to just collapsing, literally. They got people in the FSB fighting the people in the military, and they're at each other's throats. They got the knives out now. Everybody's going out for, looking out for themselves now. And Putin is losing control of that. And on top of that, the country is literally just a few months away from bankruptcy. They're literally selling their physical gold now. Their physical gold. They haven't done that in a long time. Their gold stocks are down something like 25%. No, 20, yeah, so I think it's about 25% from where they were a year ago because they got to sell the gold to raise enough cash. The country's not bringing in enough money through economic activity, so they're raising taxes on everything they can think of. They're raising taxes on the people, on fees you got to pay the government for various things. They're raising all these costs. The cost of gasoline is skyrocketing, and the supplies are plummeting. The country's teetering on the edge, and the people in this administration don't know about it. It's one of the few times I'm going to play a video from a guy named Jason J. Smart, who is in Ukraine, and he's Ukrainian, and he's an expert on these issues, and he's following Russia and monitoring it all very closely. And I'm going to recommend his channel if you think none of this is true. But watching people like him, he's the type of guy that in the past only presidents had access to. They would only have access to the type of information that someone like him could bring them. And in this internet age, it's amazing that we can have access to this information too. And I'm convinced that we know more, just regular people watching, who are well informed. We know more than the people in the White House, than the people in the administration. And honestly, I don't know if they know or they don't know. If they do know, they're covering up and they're lying about what they know. But I think there's a good chance they're just like so dumb that they don't even know. Okay. Anyway, real quick, let's take a look at the basics of this agreement. First of all, it would require Ukraine to give up its eastern Donbas region and Crimea and swear off NATO membership. Are you kidding me? Just give them everything. They dropped bombs on your people. They were unprovoked. Ukraine had done nothing to provoke this war. Of course, Putin can make up an excuse and say that he felt like they did, but that doesn't mean they did. We have to be objective. Surely you MAGA Christians don't love Putin so much just because he says gay marriage is bad that you're willing to let him get away with this, right? Anyway, Our country is now saying, give it up, give everything up, give up your country and give up your right to self-defense. It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. I feel like I went to bed on January 19th and I woke up in America, and on January 21st, I woke up in Soviet Russia. How are we different than the countries we used to fight? We used to fight them ideologically. We fought them in wars sometimes. We fought them by proxy sometimes. But how are we now different from the communist countries we used to fight? Oh, and they're complaining, oh, you don't want Biden. He's a communist. You don't want Harris. She's a communist. And who's hugging and loving the communists now? Putin's a communist. You know that, right? Please, I hope you'll tell me you know that. So Ukraine's expected to give up all this territory. Crimea, get out of here. It's just immoral. It's absolutely immoral. Give up all your territory because look, I'm going to say this. You know what it's like? It's like there's a man sleeping in his home one night. He's alone. He's alone at home. Or should I say he's home alone? Anyway, he's sleeping at home alone, and somebody breaks in with a machine gun. And the guy runs upstairs, finds the guy sleeping in the bed, pulls out the machine gun and says, give me everything you own, including the house, or I'll shoot you. And the guy, his alarm system goes off and it wakes up the neighbors. The neighbors run in, oh, there's an alarm. There's some emergency over at John's house. Let's go see what's going on. They go in, they run upstairs. They find the guy with a machine gun threatening their beloved neighbor. And you know what they say to the neighbor? They say, John, give it up. You can't win. He's got the gun. Give him all your stuff. That's what we're doing in Ukraine. You would never say an individual person should do that in a situation like I just described. You would never say that. You would hold the stand your ground laws. You would say, look, if someone's threatening me, even verbally, if they're being very verbally aggressive and I get afraid they might shoot me, stand your ground laws say, well, you can just pull out a gun and pop him off right there. And so many of you believe in that, but you don't believe a whole country that's getting bombed to smithereens by another country that was unprovoked. You don't think they have a right to say, hey, stop. We're going to fight back. We're going to shoot you back. We're going to take our territory back. You don't think they have the right to do that. Why not? Why would the United States have the right to do that, but Ukraine wouldn't? You see what's going on? There's just something so evil in this thinking where these people have gone from, what I thought used to be pretty, rational people to thinking, no, Ukraine's evil. We let them be destroyed. Who cares? It's like this cult mentality. Somebody in the cult said, yeah, let's let them be destroyed. And then everybody's like, oh, yeah, let's let them be destroyed. Nobody's thinking. I really don't get it. So it's not enough to give everything up. They also want them to give up their ability to defend themselves in the future. Part of the agreement is Ukraine must cap its military size to 600,000 people. Right now, it's about 880,000. Cut your military, what is that? I don't know, something like 25% or something. What? Why? Why? This makes no sense. It's absolutely immoral, just immoral. No NATO membership, but Ukraine can join the EU. Okay? Under the plan, Ukraine would be barred from joining NATO. I don't know why you would bar them from that, unless you just want to suck up to Russia. The country would be expected to modify its constitution to specify it will not join the 32-nation bloc, a change of course since the country's NATO aspirations currently enshrined in its constitution. And the NATO members issued a declaration agreeing that Ukraine would become a NATO member at some point in the future, but didn't set out a timeline, unfortunately. So it just doesn't make any sense unless you're completely depraved and completely immoral. And honestly, I think completely evil. It's the only way this makes sense to me. Another point in the plan says Russia will not invade neighboring countries and NATO will not expand any further. Oh, so now it's going to limit NATO too. Okay, so our alliance can't grow. Remember, the whole point of NATO is to protect the West from Russian aggression, because Russia is the only country in that area of the world who has ever been an aggressor in the last 100 whatever years. Well, Germany. Okay, Germany. But since World War II, Russia is the only nation that has continued to be an aggressor. All right, so moving on, a U.S. guarantee. The plan lays out a security guarantee if Russia reinvades Ukraine, calling for a decisive, coordinated military response and the reinstatement of sanctions on Russia. This is the biggest laugh of all. A U.S. guarantee? Are you kidding me? That used to mean something. But America is so much greater now than it was that it means nothing. Our word means nothing now. You know why our word means nothing? Because these numbskulls in power think that being dishonest and breaking promises is what makes a country great. That's what makes it a third world banana republic. I mean, we should have asked them, what is your definition of a great country? And if they had been able to describe it, they would have said, we want a third world banana republic because those people can do whatever they want. I guess. I mean, that's the direction we're headed in, right? They want to force Ukrainian elections to be held in 100 days. You know why? You know why? Because they are desperate to get rid of Zelensky because he is the strongest, most courageous, and most capable leader that they could have ever come up against. They thought he was just some comedian on a TV show. They didn't know what they were messing with. They made a big mistake messing with this guy. And speaking of that, I have seen nothing in the character of the Ukrainian people at all that would indicate they would ever go along with any of this. There's nothing in their character that would say, oh, yeah, they'll be okay giving up a bunch of land to Russia and cutting their military back and never being able to join NATO and putting their complete and whole reliance on the United States for defense when the United States now has the most dishonest leader it's ever had in its history. You know, the people in this administration, they just seem to think, Ukraine's so small and weak, they can't do anything without us. So let's just force them to do whatever we want and keep Putin on our good side. And why do they want Putin on their good side? What's so great about him? To think he's great, you got to be twisted. You got to be very twisted. And talk about twisted morality. And here's where I want to talk to Christian MAGA supporters. And I mean, what kind of, and I don't mean just human morality, but what kind of biblical morality would ever suggest to you that the aggressor nation who attacks another nation completely unprovoked and unthreatened is in the right? And what in biblical morality or biblical principles would give you the idea that God thinks that's just and we should all just stand by and let it happen? What? A nation that's not any threat to its neighbor, a nation that's like 10 times smaller than its neighbor, a nation that thought its neighbor was the second most powerful military in the world. What would make anyone think that biblically that nation can be attacked by what was supposed to be the second most powerful military in the world, can kill thousands, hundreds of thousands of citizens, not just soldiers, but citizens, and that's okay with God. God's cool with that. You know why? Because Russia's big and God likes a winner. Is that it? I mean, what are you thinking, really? Anyway, here's the really sick part and the really tragic part of it all is that the just the misunderstanding on behalf of Trump and the White House of just how close Russia is to being pushed over the edge. It's so close to bankruptcy. Um, Putin is very close to getting, you know what I mean? It's very close. Here, watch this. Jason J. Smart, very good guy. Uh, look up his channel if you haven't discovered him already. But here, listen to his first segment of his show from yesterday.
Russia is an energy superpower that today is freezing to death in the dark. In cities just outside of Moscow, families are filming ice forming on the inside of their apartment walls. While the Kremlin exports gas to the world, its own citizens are huddled in coats in their living rooms. This is not because of a weather disaster. It is because of a budget disaster. Every winter in Russia, pipes burst in towns like Podolsk and in Voronezh because the maintenance money is gone. The budget for replacing these pipes was slashed to pay for the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin made a choice. He chose to buy artillery shells instead of fixing the heating grid. Today, General Frost is waging war against Russia. But these frozen pipes are just the first crack in the dam. The real flood is coming from a sudden $82 billion hole in the national wallet. And the one country that was supposed to plug that hole has just walked away.
Is that amazing? Russia is teetering on the edge, and at the very moment that we could push them over the edge so easily, just by saying we're giving Ukraine all the weapons they need, and we're strengthening sanctions, and we give you 1 month, Russia, to get out of Ukraine, or we're going to do even worse. That's all it would take. Another month, it'd be over. It could have been over 6, 8 months ago if he'd done that. But we have, honestly, the weakest, most most cowardly president that I've had that I can think of in my lifetime. And in my lifetime, I've been aware of presidents since John Kennedy. So, okay, I was a little child when he was president. I didn't know what was going on. But since then, I've seen every president. I've never seen anybody this cowardly, this kind of lack of courage and intelligence and knowledge. And, he's just not even informed about how the world works. Tragic, tragic times. But I just want you MAGA Christians to ask yourselves, what biblically can you use to defend your stand on being against Ukraine and wanting Ukraine basically to die? How do you do that? That's not right. It's not biblical at all. That's not God's kind of justice. All right? Please think about it. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.